Troy Ark, technical agronomist, Dekalb Asgrow, Southern Ohio. So in parts of Ohio we're getting extremely dry, and in soybeans we're starting to see the presence of a pest that we really haven't seen a whole lot since about 2012. And we've got some plain examples here that we're going to go through, and we're going to show you how to diagnose this pest, and then we'll talk about some treatment guidelines here in a few minutes. So the pest we're talking about is our good old friend, the spider mite. And spider mites only really cause us issues in soybeans when it gets really hot and really dry. And that's because spider mites live in the side ditches and live in our waterways in grass species. And as those grass species start to desiccate, start to dry out, and especially as guys mow their side ditches, mow their waterways, they're really pushing those spider mites out into their soybean fields. So the symptomology that you'll see first is you get some of these soybean leaves that they'll start to yellow, and they'll start to get a stippling effect to them when you look at them from the top. And as the damage gets worse, they actually almost turn into really crispy brown. They almost look like potato chips just hanging on the end of the petiole there. So these plants we got, we're just starting to pick up some spider bite damage on these plants here. They're right on the edge of the field, but it's damage that's going to continue unless it's either treated or we get some moisture and start to drop these populations of spider mites back. So when you start to see this damage, really start to concentrate on the edge of those fields, along those waterways, along the side ditches. That's where the damage is going to start. But as populations build, those spider mites will actually start to move, and they actually will almost seem to jump out into the field because they move by wind currents. And so there'll be damage on the edge, it'll get real severe, and then you'll see the damage start to show up farther and farther throughout the field. So what to look for is this yellowing, this stippling on the top of the plant. The way to really diagnose spider mites is you get a plain sheet of just white printer paper. So you get a plain sheet of white printer paper, you take off a set of trifoliates, and you actually just tap them out. And you just tap it on that white piece of paper, and then you actually see the dust particles will look like they start to move. And if you get a hand lens, you can look at them really closely, and you actually see those spider mites starting to move. But with the naked eye, you can't hardly see them unless you tap them out on a white piece of paper, so you have a lot of contrast. And if those dust particles start to crawl around, you know you've got some spider mites. Now, talking about treating spider mites, if it's just right along the edge of a road where something's getting mowed really heavy and we start to get some rain, you're probably not going to have to treat for them. But if these drought situations continue and those soybeans continue to be stressed, you're probably going to have to start to look at treating for spider mites. Now remember, when you treat for spider mites, you can't just go out and spray any insecticide in the world, because some of our pyrethroid insecticides will actually make them worse or flare the populations, and you actually make the damage worse. So make sure you're reading labels, make sure you look at products that specifically control spider mites, because they're not all created equal, and actually some of them can make the damage worse. So those are some things to consider as we start to progress through the growing season. If it continues to stay dry, watch out for spider mites, because they might continue to become a bigger and bigger problem.